Put your head in. Thank you. Okay,
What's about?
can you double check that it's recording her?
It is recording.
Today, we're gathering to have a brief history on the evolution of political parties and their influence in the modern world. Oh. Well, you're gonna have to start over because it just, oh, no. Okay. So the US president earns $400,000 a year. But can that ever truly compensate for the intense polarization and responsibility of the office? Candidates spend billions to win, but what are they fighting for and how do they lead such a divided country? The thesis for this presentation today is to provide a foundational understanding of the origins of two major political parties and their ideological differences and how they influence today's politics in a tech-driven society. First point we're going to go over is creation, like the origin of the Republican and Democratic Party. So how they were initially founded and why parties were even established in the first place. So the reason that parties were established was back in the day, there weren't exactly political parties, rather there were just a significant amount of individuals running. So originally there was a lot of confusion as to what each member or candidate actually wanted and represented, where they stood on certain things. So eventually they came together and just had it for groups, right? Rural versus urban, rich versus poor, not versus, but who they represented. And that's kind of how they ended up filtering down to political parties. So when they understood the candidates represented these parties, that helped them understand who they should vote for as far as affiliation and representation. The political party and Democratic Party stemmed originally together. They were against, I believe, the Federalists, and then, yes, teacher, and then, and they had split into the Federalists and then the Whigs, and then I think the Democratic Party as well, Democratic Republican Party still, no. And the Republicans then, when the Whigs had dissipated, that's when just the Republican Party came afloat. So that's how they started. For Democrats, they were evolved from Jefferson and Madison's Democratic Republican Party. And Andrew Jackson's populist movement in the 1820s, which led to today's modern Democratic Party. Their most influential president that they had, which was the 7th president, was Andrew Jackson. Today, it's really interesting that he would be known to be more aligned almost as a Republican or conservative as far as how aggressive he was. I didn't know this until I was reading more into it, that he may have been a good president, but not been a very good person. And what he had gone after was so aggressive. And in today's modern society, right, if he was trying to replicate it, it would not work for him in this environment at all. And he truly tried to just eradicate American Indians. Jeffrey Ostler dives more into it in his 2024 publication he just released, so that you can figure out a little more that it's just not talked about. It's kind of like the dark circle or shadow of America. These parties definitely shaped American politics. However, today their ideological differences are much more pronounced as opposed to just rural and urban or the classes. Today, Democrats are generally, is it okay to say all that in front of the kids? Okay. Pro-choice, they support equality and environmental sustainability, and they are more the party of movements, right? In regards to Green New Deal, BLM, and things such as that. They advocate for progressive and aggressive taxation amongst the rich to then disperse amongst all the classes for a more socialist, is that the correct economy? Yeah. And they currently reach for a more government overreach, I guess, into your everyday activity. So it just trickles down from the top and then governs how everybody behaves. On the contrary, the Republicans, they protect a nuclear family, they have traditional values, and they support limited government, right? So they have a centralized government belief, but they also really want local ordinances to be the defining factor in a lot of controversial issues, because that's what applies to their community. They focus on self-sufficiency, individual rights, and capitalism. 43% of Americans have a negative view of Democrats, and 38% of Democrats have the same feeling towards Republicans, according to Carol Daughtry in 2024. I'm sure in 2014, I'm sure that has significantly increased as well. The personal experience that I've had living in a super liberal state versus a super conservative state is in California, where it's more liberal towards punishment, crime, and police support. You're going to find significantly higher crime rates. You're going to find less response times, and the community just isn't acting as a whole. On the opposite spectrum, we have North Idaho, where it is very well supported for police response times. The community always protects each other, to the point where I never had to leave my car locked until I moved to California. And you don't have the same concerns, right? You don't know of it until you're kind of in the opposite spectrum. Yeah, so ideological differences shape communities. Modern technology now, unfortunately, plays a really large role in how politics have infiltrated towards everyone else, especially during election years, which we are experiencing now or just had experienced. And how does politics have influence in such a tech-driven world? So, political platforms and campaigning. Really quick, Colleen McLean in 2024, from just this last year, Americans spend an average of 4.5 hours a day on their phones. And political campaigns obviously are going to take advantage of that, knowing that a majority of Americans spend that much time, right? If you're already working 8 hours, you're on your phone 4.5 hours, they're going to take advantage of that opportunity through TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, X, Twitter, that one as well. And again, it's one of those bittersweet things where less than 20% of the political influencers are the ones that are responsible for 80% of the circulated messages as well. So when you look at the data that was presented in the other visual aid presentation, we break it down a little bit more. For Republicans, they focus on national security when they're targeting their audience on social media. They focus on national security, liberty, and freedoms. That provokes an emotional response to their audience, while Republicans, again, they focus on movements, right? So how you feel, what's going to happen to the energy. So it's almost a fear-based situation. Impact on voter engagement. This, again, it's similar to the last thing. It just really provokes an emotional response on both sides, right? And politicians are kind of wising up by learning to fund social media advocates to speak on their behalf, because they already have audiences established, so they don't have to build rapport and infiltrate from the beginning. They can go to social media influencers and get their feet in the door. And, it's hit or miss. So if they retrieve any additional voters, it's a win. If they don't, right, they may not have been counting them anyways. With social media being such a big source right now, the challenges of misinformation are heavier than ever, because there's 30% of Americans currently under 40 years old use social media as their primary outlet for news information. This is provided many times on Pew Research Center from 2020 to 2024 now again. So knowing that the political candidates are utilizing social media influencers, they're also going to have a specific narrative. Their messages are going to be catered. So we have two really good social media influencer examples. We have AOC, so Alexandria Ortiz, Ocasio-Cortez, and then we also have Charlie Kirk on the other end. So we have two opposite spectrums, right? So as soon as you hear either or, you get an emotional response or a physical response, and you know the message immediately that they're trying to send as well. However, on both sides, sometimes they run because they aren't obligated to run under certain political guidelines. They don't have to watch what they're saying, right? So this is where a lot of misinformation gets fueled. A really good, unfortunate one that I'm going to bring up is that as soon as Kamala Harris lost and announced that she was in debt, people had gone on social media saying that it was because she overspent on celebrity endorsements. Unfortunately, the only paper trail of that really is that Oprah rented a stadium to her, and the Kamala Harris paid for the stadium because it wasn't free. And ultimately, the people had to be paid. And Oprah made an announcement, it wasn't her, and she wanted to clear the air. However, nobody has heard the real story because people eat it up. Like, news doesn't spread like wildfire anymore. Drama spreads like wildfire. So it's just more entertaining to think that Oprah was bought for $1 million. But she wasn't, or she was. So in today's divided, tech-driven world, political parties are not only defined by the historical roots, but they are also how they adapt to rapidly changing media landscapes. As technology continues to evolve, so will strategies and political parties on how they influence their voters. Understanding how political parties evolved and how they continue to engage with today's tech-savvy population is crucial in navigating the challenges of increasingly polarized political parties. Good night.